my secret. Just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Hello, welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at Iba Pa. This is producer Mike, and I am joined by
Joe Bernardo,
Ryan Carpio,
Olay Delalis,
and
Girly, finally.
Oh yeah, there you are.
and Curly gets the air horns because I started off the introduction this time, which is weird and bizarre, and I'm sorry if that's weird for you guys to hear me talking first, but here I am.
That was great.
See Miss Person Warden of my life, Girly Collado.
Oh, that's cute.
Please.
You mean our guest feature of this episode, Girly?
Seriously,
Thank you.
Girly, it's good to have you. We haven't seen you on the
Thanks.
show in a while.
Because Joe doesn't let me.
Oh
No.
He's like, here, take the baby. I got something to do.
Oh, Joe.
Mommy and Daddy are fighting.
Say it ain't so, Joe.
Whatever.
All right, do we have a TFAL of the episode?
Yes, the TFAL is Jen Ting.
Jen.
Ting.
Ting.
It's so cute. I like that.
Is your mother the Ting Ina?
Oh,
Oh my God.
that is
Wow.
awful.
That's
I'm just
bad.
saying.
There's so many.
That's really bad.
We did the jokes episode last time, guys.
Oh, goodness.
I thought
Filipino
you were
dad
gonna-
jokes.
That happens every episode, Mike. What are you talking about?
I totally
every
thought
day of
he
my
was
life,
gonna
Michael.
say- He thought he was gonna say, "Is your mother Wallis?"
Oh,
Wallisting?
Oh, Wallis.
Uh,
Oh, come on.
oh.
well, thank you for being the TFAL of the episode regardless.
Seriously. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Jen. We appreciate you, and we are able to do this show and tell silly dad jokes because of contributions to our Patreon.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. What are you talking about, Mike?
Yeah, it's the middle of November, 2020. Something happened not that long ago. And we'll get into that maybe a little bit later.
Is it
Veterans
COVID?
Day.
Veterans Day, yeah, it was Veterans Day.
Oh, it's not COVID. Okay.
No. So, I mean, I wanted to talk to you guys about Filipinos in politics.
Oh.
That
Yes.
seems opportune.
Odd timing, right? You know, who knew we would talk about that right now?
Filipinos in
Um,
politics. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, just because, you know, some of us have had experience in the community organizing around political issues, elected officials, etc. Some of us have direct experience working for elected officials. And, you know, and even this year, in this year's election, there were a number of Filipinos running for offices, some yet to be decided. But I just wanted to kind of get into, you know, Filipino representation kind of at that level. You know, as our community has grown in America, and what are we, the number 1 or number 2 now? I don't keep track of the stats anymore.
Of what?
In terms of
Number
Asian
one.
American
Fastest growing.
populations.
Oh, we're actually,
Yeah.
I think we're number 3 now.
What?
Yeah, Indian
Oh, we don't work on
Americans.
that.
So it was the fastest growing the
Oh.
last 10 years.
Uh,
Yeah.
but along with that, population growth has grown like our representation in different spaces, both locally and nationally. And so just wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts about all of that. Starting with, you know, LA. You know, we've all been kind of rotating in that circle of politics for some time now. And I was trying to think about, are there any prominent like Filipinos that have been in office or worked in an elected office that, you know, maybe probably were the firsts. Or maybe it's just you guys.
I think it's always no. I don't know. I mean, I think for it's always exciting to have kind of like Filipino representation in the political stage. I think
Mhm.
For me, the reason I get excited about it is because I think of American politics as very different from Philippine politics. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But I just know that it's the opportunity in the United States to run for office for Filipino Americans is definitely there, and there's not very many that did run for office, or there weren't many that were elected. Uh, in Southern California, I know we had a few mayors and city council people that have been representing Filipino Americans, like Mark Polito, for example, in the Cerritos area, has represented Filipino Americans for quite some time, and I think he just sunsetted his terms. I think
Yeah.
he was termed out recently. So that was
From
always
the entire city council.
yeah. So it was a council mayor rotation in Cerritos. So, and from that, I think kind of inspired some of the other folks to run for office. So, some of our friends like Melissa Hermoso and Artesia, and Jocelyn Manalo up in Daly City is another Filipino American that's been elected to city council. To be honest with you, like there's more congressional races. There's a lot of Fil-Ams nationally and for the state of California even on the rise. In this podcast, we've done a few political episodes. We've met with politicians who represent the Filipino American communities. When we went to San Diego, we met with
Kate.
Chris Kate or Chris Kate.
Kate. He's itchy.
I know. Eating to win. And it was that was really great. And it really does excite me. Regardless of political affiliation to some degree, it's just exciting to know that there are folks out there willing to take that risk. And it is a giant risk, especially how elections are done here. You need to raise a lot of money, and it's just, with social media out there, everything's kind of up front and center. So I'm just really glad that more and more Fil-Ams are running. Whatever political stance they take, I think it's a good thing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
In LA, there's been a lot of commission appointments too of Filipino Americans, and I think that's also very much a part of the pipeline of electeds. Once you get into a position like that, you start to know you're starting to get to know the ins and outs of government. So it gives you a better sense of what is involved if and when you do choose to run for office. Right. So it's great to see the pipeline growing, not just in Los Angeles, but in other parts of the nation.
No, I think there's been, especially since the 1970s, there's been a lot of Filipino Americans, running for office and winning. Like in Seattle, they have a long history of people, Filipino Americans in state and local legislatures. Bay Area, there's tons of Filipinos who have won city council seats and other kind of local positions. I forgot Tita Alice Bulos, right?
Yeah,
she's a longtime political advocate in the Bay Area, and I think she's gonna have a road or a freeway or something.
Yeah, some kind of memorial for her.
I forget. I'm sorry. Yeah. I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But she's a longtime political advocate in the Bay Area. So yeah, I think a lot of Filipinos have won. There isn't enough, but I think in Filipino areas and non-Filipino American areas, there's been quite a history of Filipinos in elected office. In New Jersey, there's a lot. I know, but it's kind of funny. Like a lot of the folks in New Jersey, like I've seen, who have won elected office, they've been Republican. Same with San Diego. Heavily Republican. In the Bay Area, it's mostly Democrats. Right. LA is kind of mixed. So yeah.
What are you, Elaine?
I find it fascinating just because, like, I haven't really worked directly with politics, in politics, but I've always seen you all, like, and by you all, I mean Joe, Ryan, and Mike, work like on different campaigns and whatnot, and just see the impact of it all. And then just seeing like, I always get really like very impressed that of the engagement of some folks to even run for office feels like such like an endeavor. So to see like a large number of Filipino Americans take that step in this election cycle was really inspiring. And like Mike knows this, but like if I saw like a random Filipino American running, I would go to their campaign and donate, like just because like, well, why not? I have COVID quarantine extra funds, so I'll spread the wealth for these people. And somebody like, I don't live in their state, but I wanted to help in whatever way I can, right? So like Gina Ortiz in Texas, she ran for a congressional seat. She's a vet. She's queer. She would have flipped that seat blue had she won. She didn't win though this term, from my understanding. But she ran a really close race in Texas. And so like, it's inspiring to know that like folks, even when you lose, right? Like you're still laying the groundwork for somebody or for another campaign in the future.
But what if the candidate sucks?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, try.
No, not to
try
say
to do some research.
Well, I mean, I've gotten approached before by Filipino American candidates, and their platforms don't align with my values, so I won't support them just because they're Filipino. That's where I stand with that.
Yeah, it's not like an automatic, like, oh, of course I'm going to support you. You know, Filipino, like, here's the money.
Right.
You know, it's much more nuanced than that.
On the very kind of like visual level and very basic level of what we rely on, I think that's just par for the course, right? You're going to have people that you disagree with, and it's still okay to be happy that someone like Filipino American like running. I mean, if they don't agree with your line, then you just don't vote for them. You campaign differently. But the fact that they're able to, I think that's kind of neat. Because for such a long time, we're relying on other people. For example, in Joe's and mine experience, right? We went and we sort of rely on an elected official to hire Filipinos, right?
Yeah.
To campaign we as Filipinos, as a voting bloc, we campaign for someone who may not be Filipino, and then rely on them to hire us. So the representation kind of like, for lack of a better term, like trickles down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to see that the person running is actually Filipino descent or Filipino American, I think that's great, and just that knowledge is really, really cool, to experience that and to influence that. And I also wanted to kind of demystify some things in terms of like being at the table, and I think we learned. Joe, this is a little bit personal, but we learned early on, because from maybe this is a stereotypical representation, but there wasn't a lot of aggressiveness from Filipino Americans to sort of demand something of an elected official if they were like a voting bloc, for example, to sort of demand like what Gurley was talking about, like commission appointments, or demand from an elected official that you need to look at Filipino Americans as part of your staff, as management, as your commissions. There is this kind of shyness towards that from a Filipino standpoint. I experience it because I'm not very aggressive. I'm very shy, so I tend to shy away from the opportunities, because for such a long time I was just happy being around, like being at the table. Mm-hmm. So what I want to demystify is being at the table means you have to actually speak at that table. And we were a literal table. Joe and I were really asking for a representation in the city, in Southern California, Los Angeles, of Filipino Americans, and to create that atmosphere of saying, we deserve it, we worked hard for this, we want it. And this is not even from a running standpoint. This is just from a standpoint of being represented by someone we supported.
Yeah, I mean, we referenced it on the episode, like the naming of historic Filipino town in part, or maybe in whole was like so that we could represent ourselves as like a force in the city,
Right.
a political economic force. And so even that as a political act and a way to kind of galvanize and coalesce people behind certain causes was part of that, right?
Yes, absolutely, and it is part of that. It is about moving sort of the art, whatever our talking points might be,
Mhm.
right? Whether it be a cultural talking point or fighting for Filipino American vets or Filipino World War II veterans, whatever it might be just on the street, might be legislative, and nationally might be immigration and healthcare, and all that. But the point that I'm saying is like, I think there's a cool kind of trajectory towards the rise of Filipino Americans like running for office, and it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Much like anything else with representation. So
I just remember when I think it was when Mayor Villaraigosa here in Los Angeles first got elected. He actually came to like a JFAV or Justice for Filipino American Veterans parade in Filipino Town. I think actually to like, tell the Filipino community that he was there for us, because I guess based upon the data that year, like Filipinos did not come out for him. And he was a little bit incensed about it. And it was so weird because he rolled up in his like special car. And Villaraigosa is not Filipino. If you're not from Los Angeles, he's Latino. But he came to the Filipino Veterans March and was just like, I hear you guys, clearly like I have not stepped up to the plate for you. What do I need to do to get your trust as a community? And he said this at like, one of our events, because I think he realized that we were like a voice of the people in this community that he needed to pay attention to. And I don't know what even triggered that conversation, but it was just interesting to have like the newly elected mayor of the city just come up and say like, okay, I'm here, let's talk, like what can we do to like kind of bridge this gap that apparently exists?
There is something about holding electeds accountable, no matter their ethnic background. There was so much momentum in this election period around grassroots organizing, and people got the outcomes that they were shooting for, in terms of having leaders who are more understanding of racial justice, etc. But once they're in office, the work needs to continue to keep them accountable and to keep working towards whatever commitments they made during their campaigns.
No, I was gonna say like regardless of who the elected official is, I think, or even like elected like cycles.
Right.
I think it's still important to organize and to like push the powers that be, whoever they are, to to understand and to bring resources to the Filipino American community.
Yeah.
Do you think we talked a little bit about what if we don't agree with their politics, right? What if we don't agree with they're Filipino American, what if we don't agree with their politics? So how do you combat that when the Filipinos that are running maybe not are not in your same thought? How much more important is organizing then, when most of your organization might be geared towards just targeting Filipino Americans, regardless of what their political views are? Do you think there's? Yeah,
I think it's a judgment call that we all make, right? With just elections in general, like right now, like this country is pretty well divided amongst party lines.
Yeah.
It isn't always like that. It wasn't always like that. I mean, I think about going back to people running for office, like say like back in Oxnard, there was a guy running for mayor. His name was Tony Gray, or as the Filipinos would say, Tony Garay. But like, he was running on a platform of basically just, we're here in this community, we're a major force and we need representation. He wasn't running on any specific like political issues. He was running on a representation issue, which I think a lot of Filipinos connected with, regardless of whether or not like, he was in the right party or the wrong party. I don't even remember what party he was in, because that wasn't the most prominent thing about his campaign for mayor. It was more that just like, we've been here, we've been working the fields, we were part of the military. There's like a whole Filipino community in this city. It's about time that we had somebody at the mayor level or even city council level that represented that. And he didn't win, I don't think. But just that very factor alone was enough. mean, but now I think, yeah, we're much more sophisticated about it. We ask these
That's what I was getting
questions,
at. Mhm.
and I think, like, it's just a matter of does the representation and diversity this person could bring to the office, could it, even if like they're more moderate than you'd like,
Right.
is there still a value to the political conversation that could happen if they're so far afield of where you are politically? I mean, they're going to do however they're going to do. I mean, even when we talk to Chris Cate Chris Cate in San Diego, I mean, he's a Republican, right? And but his whole platform and his whole approach to all of this was much more around kind of like real core community issues, and he wasn't even trying to get into kind of like the divide that exists because of the different parties. Like it exists, but it wasn't his priority or his platform. And sometimes you kind of just got to ask, like, is this person, whatever party they represent, there for the right reasons and working on the right issues? And that's where the ground game really becomes important, because to either create the pressure for them to kind of do that kind of work that you want them to do, regardless of whatever party they come from, or to like be a part of those campaigns and make sure that message gets out there that this is who this person represents.
But I think, or when you're talking about the person from Oxnard, like, and you're saying like the community has matured, like, I don't know, I have we though? Has the Filipino community matured in a way where, because I feel like a lot of Filipinos, they just want representation, and they're not even following the politics. They're not following the issues, right? They just want somebody who looks like them.
I know.
No, but like, but the thing is, like, you're not going to win that way. You're not even going to win if
Case
you're
in
just
point.
you're not going to win if your only platform is that you're a Filipino.
Agree.
Right?
Well, and then I also think, like, when you ask, like, have Filipinos matured, I think it's a hard thing to really go by, just because the community is still largely like there are immigrants coming in, right? So there's then like an onboarding to whatever the political system is here. And then like there's like and then it's like the newness factor of like the ideologically what will you support? And so I feel like that is where I'm like, in Seattle, Filipinos are older generations, right? And so they have a stakehold into the political system there. But then
they've like, there's a generation of Seattle Filipinos who have been involved, since the 70s, and they've become a political force because of that.
Yeah.
Right? And they organize even new immigrants to like get involved with the political process. Right.
Well, okay.
However successful or not successful they are, like, for example, I think the city council person who used to be there, the Filipino city council person, is no longer, like, he lost after his first term. Right.
Okay.
I think Filipinos do continue to immigrate here, but there are, there are different factors of why they're not, Filipinos haven't been as represented in the electoral level as like other communities. There's multiple reasons for that, right? But I think all in all, like, you have to get involved. And I think Filipino immigrants who first come here, they're not going to be involved in the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of the political environment that causes people to get involved.
Yeah.
But I think that's where organizing is really essential. Because, I think about the work that took place in the deep south of the United States this election period. I mean, grassroots groups reach out to voters who have been historically marginalized, historically ignored. And I kind of feel like that's similar to, new Filipino immigrants, as you stated, Elaine. Like groups, organizations need to reach out to them and just start to educate them. And perhaps it's not so much to sway them any certain way, but get them to understand all sides of an issue that affects them. I mean, at a really fundamental level, if we're talking about infrastructure of neighborhoods, even, that affects everybody day to day. So, I mean, I think about like how my parents were voting when I was in high school or even elementary school, and like they never had these conversations around the table about like just politics in general. And I think even now they kind of barely understand some of the issues that are being put on the ballot, and also candidates. So it's just, I think it is essential to have groups who are going to play that role of helping to educate voters.
I have a question for you all.
Yeah.
How do you feel about elected officials who are Filipino but don't, or who haven't been involved in the Filipino American community at all?
Who sort of just pander?
Not pander, but like it's like Filipino, like it's like a Filipinos in the community claiming them when they haven't even been involved too much in the Filipino community.
I mean, I think
they're out there. You know, they're out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it happens in a lot of other ethnic communities too. My initial reaction when that happens is like, who the hell are you? And where the hell are you coming from? What the hell are your politics? And why are you talking to me? What do you want? That's kind of my initial reaction. And then, you know, eventually I start to get to know them a little more. But really, like, if you're gonna come out of the woodworks at some point and you know, want to engage me in some sort of way, then you need to figure out like who I am, what my needs are, and how we can work together, you know, to have you represent me.
Right. So I'm gonna play both sides to this. As I'm gonna look at it from a person running for office, right? So if we didn't have the Filipino Americanness as our common denominator, I have to find some common denominator, kind of like what Girly was saying, with you on what your politics is. So if there's a Filipino American out there who's running for office and they came to me and our politics are very different, or there's a risk that our politics may be very, very different, I wouldn't be mad at them for claiming the Filipino Americanness, because I want to win, right? I want to win. So if I want to win, and if it's risky to tell you about my politics because that's not why you're going to vote for me, and the reason you're going to vote for me is because I'm Filipino, I'm going to pander to that. And pander might be the wrong word, but I'm gonna harp on that. Yeah,
you're gonna use it.
I'm gonna use
leverage.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leverage that information because that's how I'm gonna get you to vote for me. If I'm let's say if I'm more conservative and I'm going into a very progressive like Filipino community, I'm not gonna talk about my politics. I'm gonna talk about my Filipino-ness. Does that make sense?
You're gonna you'll find the common denominator. Right.
So I'm not mad at that. Will I fall for it? I hope not. I think most people might. Well, because the thing that I wanted to talk about is Girly and I are kind of on the same wavelength as this. Most politics is not national. Most politics is not at all. It's local. It's local. Most of it is like, hey man, who's gonna make sure my road's fixed? How are we gonna be able to represent ourselves in a festival here? What park am I going to be able to go to? A lot of it is not Democrat or Republican. A lot of it is like very basic needs. It's about water. It's about clean water. It's about access to stuff. It's about disability access to stuff. It's about, you know, all of these things. It's why on the local level, even the selection of Filipinos in positions of commissions is so important. But to go back to your question, Joe, when that happens, you know, is it shameful? I mean, sure, but I think we take it personally because we are Filipino American and we have been involved. But I think the reason it happens is because it works.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, like,
Yeah.
Like legit, it does work. Like I just said, like I contributed
You gave
to
money.
campaigns because I saw that they were Filipino, right? And I'm not gonna. I will preface this and say I do a bit of research on the person as well. Like I want to see whether or not they align with my values. And I mean, it's no like it's not hidden anywhere. I think I lean a little bit left of center than most folks, and like but not like super. But I don't consider myself like extremely to the left. But I wouldn't contribute. Like I know I wouldn't contribute to somebody that I didn't align with my values. So does it work? Yeah, because it's a common denominator at base. And then I will have to say this: you got to do a little bit of effort, right? Like you got to go to the person's campaign website. You got to read what their platform is. You got to like really do like some form of research, and see whether or not it makes sense that this person should represent their community.
And to the candidates that are, or to the people that are running, do your homework too. Like what I mean by that
absolutely.
is like, be genuine. If there are some people who are more seasoned and understand, like, you're pandering or something, but do your research. Actually work with the community. And that's the part that's I'm imploring for anybody who wants to run in the future. Like, be real about it. And I guess that's where you're getting at, Joe. Like, I think to some degree, it can't just be like Filipino, check.
What about, so like, on the flip side of that though, what about candidates who have been identified as Filipino, but don't reference that, don't run on that, almost maybe like shy away from it because they're trying to bridge that gap with
question.
With the people in the community that are truly kind of like the large political blocks, right? Like we were saying earlier, like, Filipinos, as the population grows, we have more political power. But what I've noticed from all the candidates that have been running, at least in this year, a lot of them are in areas that I didn't even realize there was a significant Filipino population to begin with.
Yeah.
Like Gene Ortiz in Texas, there's somebody out in Georgia, Utah, etc. Like, on the one hand, it's a kind of an interesting, yardstick for like, where is the diaspora these days in terms of like, where are Filipinos, to the point where some of them feel comfortable with running for office. But I wouldn't have known that Gina Ortiz was Filipino until Elaine told me about it. And I don't know if Gina Ortiz was necessarily running with her identity as part of her platform, for example. And so, not to say that she was trying to shy away from it either, but, and we've talked about this in like maybe a past episode about like when we kind of raise somebody up because they have some Filipino heritage as like this like celebrity or hero to the community because of that heritage, and not really because of like what they've done or who they are, I guess. But yeah, like what do we do in the instances in which like Filipino-ness is shied away from or not even like referenced?
Well, that I guess that was my original question, right? Was what about those Filipinos who, like you said, do shy away from their identity, or they don't wear it on their sleeve, like people who are quote unquote members of the Filipino community, right? And I wonder if that's even like, what is more successful, right, in terms of winning?
Well, I mean, if they're able to win without the Filipino community support, then shit. What are you gonna say to that?
Kudos. What are you gonna say, Joe?
But again, like if they are in a district where Filipinos are a significant portion of the population, then it doesn't sound like a very smart strategy to ignore Filipinos in their district.
Yeah, but most Filipinos don't live in those areas. Right? I mean, even Daly City, right? Daly City is only 30% Filipino, right? Like they couldn't have won without, with solely the Filipino American vote, right?
Right.
Maybe why Tony Gray and like Oxnard didn't win, because I think not that he necessarily relied on the Filipino vote in Oxnard, but I don't remember much of his platform beyond that. Well, maybe because I also was young and I wasn't paying attention as much, but everyone was basically like, vote for Tony Gray. He's the Filipino. That's basically what they would say. Right.
Okay.
So I mean, I think in general, if you do want to win in a, if you do want to win if you're Filipino American and you want to win elected office, you have to build coalitions, right? You can't just
Yeah.
strictly be on a Filipino American issue or run on that issue alone,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I think that's something like it's very unique to running for politics in this country, though. Like,
Yeah.
coalition building is the way to get movement and policy across. I mean, Mike is worked on Measure J, which is a local measure in Los Angeles, and that was like literally a coalition of several partners in order for that to come through.
But I mean, the question that comes up amongst like my coworkers sometimes is, knowing that I work in the Filipino community, the Asian American community, sometimes the question comes like, how do we connect to that community on these issues? And I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I think there's a recognition that, a very broad message, doesn't necessarily bring in a broad coalition. You have to really engage with each of these communities.
You have to tailor it to the community.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you know people who have just run because they are popular in the community or in any kind of community?
45.
No, okay.
Yeah. That's
Other
fair.
than that, but like I'm just saying, I know people who have ran just because they are
The known
because everybody in the Filipino community knows them.
Mm.
Oh,
person.
really?
Like Pacquiao.
Girly with the jokes. No, I get that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't want to name any names, but yeah, I know a couple people who have done that.
Yeah.
Like in the States?
Have they won?
Yeah, in
And they
the
won?
Valley. No, they lost, of course.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
There you go.
I mean,
Oh, I got it.
Maybe they shouldn't be doing that.
well,
I
think I'm not mad at them either.
I mean, you
I'm not mad at them, but like
I'm
it's
not mad-
kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird.
I think that's a fascinating concept to think that just because enough people know me, I'm going to run and win and not have any like coalition or like relationships with other communities. I feel like it's a naive thought to think that would be the sole way you would win.
Yeah.
I'm all about the process.
Yeah.
I really am. To me, if you're part of a process that allows other people to say, "Oh shoot, if that person can run, I can run too," yeah, regardless if that's a positive or a negative. It's like, shoot, if that person won or that person's running, I should be running too. I think it's all part of the process. So that's kind of where I'm getting at with all this. So.
It is interesting to look at the Asian American voting bloc as a whole, because like for several years, like several election cycles, I had always heard the term 80-20, where if 80% of Asian Americans voted in a certain voting bloc, they could turn the tide for a candidate. And that had been like the number I had heard. I'd like seen other like Dem organizers feed me, which was like, we got to get 80% of Asian American population to go for this candidate because then we could get them that way. And I do think that like Asian American, Filipino American work, like outreach, helps sway a lot of the campaigns this year. Or because like in general, if like voter turnout in this election cycle nationally is larger than most, right? Like
Record breaking.
We've all seen the numbers, and it was just like there was a stat where it looked like if you looked at like in different Asian American populations, the amount of participation was just like exponentially higher in comparison, like 200% in some communities, which is flabbergasting. And so like it really is telling that like the Asian American community was coming out in numbers to the voting booths. And like even at that point, like the commentators, they still don't actually say like it's always like white, black, Latino. At one point they put something else, which I thought was really fucked up because the something else was actually in reference to an indigenous person from Hawaii. and so the something else was basically the native population. And then I can't even recall if I saw Asian Americans on that list. But it's like mainstream media may not be focusing on us, but we're still trying to harness, like the community itself is trying to harness the power that we have to be counted and to be like to have our voice.
So you say that, and getting our voice out there and getting people elected, has that resulted in any like intangible impact on the Filipino community, whether it was a Filipino candidate or not, like getting organized and getting behind a candidate? Have we seen any kind of tangible effects from that? Because I think sometimes like the thought is, depending on what kind of voter you are, is like, well, why would I vote if I'm, what impact would that even have? And even talking about like Filipino community, like such a small community in some places, like what is the potential and opportunity for the Filipino community to, I don't want to say benefit, but to like, feel that impact in a specific way?
I this is all like anecdotal evidence, but like Rusely Bongolan, I think that's how you say her last name. She was a Biden person on the campaign, and she was working with Asian Americans on voter engagement in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Engaging Asian American voters in Georgia to vote for Biden. And like she actively worked on that. And like we have seen that Georgia has turned blue. It flipped blue. And I'm not saying it rests on Asian American votes. It was a grassroots effort. It's not all us, that's for damn sure. But Stacey Abrams and other like Black women organizers on the ground really laid the groundwork for all of it. And I totally commend it. But I do see that Asian Americans were following the lead in terms of like, look, they're making it work. And they made us, they flipped the state from red to blue. And I'm like, I think that's amazing. I don't know. I'm just very like, oh my God, that's how political processes can work. That is your democracy at work. Holy crap.
Without all the with all the major freaking like campaign reform that needs to happen, and
that part. Like maybe it's because like
voter suppression
in form of gerrymandering and fewer voting polls. Like it's the amount of work done so that you can't vote is so disgusting. But then these people, everybody still actively worked towards it, and then the state turned blue.
I used to say that I got that jobs increased for Filipinos when I got hired into politics.
By one?
Like, and increase
by one?
job with the local,
Well, the other thing I want to bring into this conversation is issues like, around initiatives, because there's so many in California. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what they're like in other states, but, I was on a call with a number of grassroots organizers who were working in Georgia recently. And one of the leaders said, it's not about the candidates, it's about issues. And the organizing was definitely focused on the issues. So who among the candidates were supporting specific issues that would benefit, communities of color? Right. And those were the things that they were really pushing for. So, in terms of like Filipinos and issues that we that affect us on a daily basis, even thinking about the initiatives in California, I mean, I'm actually really disappointed by the loss of, I think, what was it, Proposition 15, 26? I don't know. I forget what all the numbers
15.
were. Was 15 the education one?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It was the one that was supposed to change the tax code so that it would undo Prop 13, which underfunded education in California for decades. It was meant to kind of take us back towards what we used to be, basically.
Right.
In terms of like how taxes went into education. Yeah.
Right. And then the other one was the one that involved tech workers,
Oh, 22.
like Uber
22.
and Lyft were like, oh my God, you can see how much money was being spent on that campaign by those companies.
Crazy.
It was crazy how like all the mailers we were getting and all the things that you were seeing on TV everywhere. So the issue around that and how it impacts union organizing for employees, like all of those messages were so just insignificant just because of all the spending from the companies.
Right.
But like, are there other issues or I mean historically that we've seen where they've won, the issues have moved forward and
well, does anyone have the history or know the history behind why, at least in the state of California, that Filipinos are segmented separately from other Asian American groups on like demographic data collection? Like you
I
see
talked about this.
I thought that was
Yeah,
census.
Joe talked about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, give us the 30-second version.
Basically, Filipino Americans in California lobbied then Governor Jerry Brown and the California legislature to pass legislation basically saying that Filipinos needed to be separate, categorized separately from Asian Americans because of our numbers and our unique kind of history. So basically disaggregating the data among Asian Americans.
I mean, I would argue all the Asian American categories need to be disaggregated for the purposes of understanding like the different demographic, nuances. But I mean, like, there's that. I mean, again, like we referenced historic Filipino town also as like kind of a mass kind of organizing effort in different ways. I mean, when it comes to like initiatives and policies, like there have been some identifiable impacts and like wins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think for example, not for example, but I think in general, I think that the level where it's going to impact Filipinos the most, I think, who Filipino Americans, is the state level, because they have to deal with like so many labor laws.
Right.
I think because Filipinos are by and large wage laborers in the United States, legislation that affects wage labor, I think, affects Filipino Americans most than any kind of like local issues or only national issues, maybe immigration. But I think labor is where Filipinos should be organizing the most. That's what I believe.
Well, shit. Can we keep focusing on that? Because I mean, like from the grape strikes, like how many years is it going to take for us to like for this lesson to sink in?
Well, so that's part of it. Is a lot of people don't know. We were talking about what the impacts are and what the process is, but to bring up a point of like electeds, right? We have in California, you have Assemblymember Rob Bonta, Filipino American, born in the Philippines, came here in the 70s to the United States, very well educated, but he represents Alameda in Northern California, and passed legislation to make sure that the schools talk about Filipino American history, to kind of understand our connection with labor movement. And hopefully, like, what other things can you legislate towards that, what Joe and Gurley were talking about? But those are like the impacts, right? Those are the legislative impacts that representation does, and that elected officials that are Filipino American or not necessarily Filipino American, but are fighting for Filipino Americans or do have representation in that. And I know we wanted to kind of talk on a larger scale about elections, but you guys are absolutely right when it comes to what is the process and what is the impact of the Filipino American electeds out there.
Yeah,
people who are just running.
All of that being said, though, and I think we have kind of touched on but haven't really got into, is the fact that obviously Filipino Americans are not a monolith. We're not all voting for the same things all the time. Arguably, there is maybe a generational divide, an immigration status divide. We're not all. If there's a Filipino candidate out there, they might represent a plethora of things beyond just being Filipino, obviously. And so, I think a thing that has kind of come up in some of the conversations lately is like, Filipinos who would have voted for and support our outgoing president.
Damn it, Mike! I thought we weren't going to talk about this.
And Filipinos,
Bring it, Mike,
who supported another victorious candidate.
You said local. You said you wanted to talk serious. This is bullshit.
But I mean, yeah, it's an interesting conversation just because I think like what I've noticed and my parents are card-carrying Republicans, as I've mentioned in this podcast before. I am not.
Cards?
They have actual
cards. There's an actual card. My Lolo had one. I remember.
And I mean, I'm not going to speak to the politics of all of you, but I mean, clearly there is kind of a divide there, and I don't know if you guys want to like comment on that.
I'll comment on it in that.
Yeah,
I am extremely lucky that I have parents who hated our outgoing president, and were like, they didn't care for Biden, and my dad doesn't like Kamala Harris, but he was like, screw this stupid moron who is in office. And then they were going to vote for, and they voted for Biden and Harris. And my dad even joked with my mom when he was filling out his ballot. And he was like, "Oh, look, I voted for Trump." And my mom went, "What?" And then she like, "Give me your ballot." And looked at the ballot, and
there's the fake voting right there.
I know, right? Are you?
There it is.
Are you indicating voter fraud in your family, Elaine?
No. And I think I'm really lucky in that my parents, I don't have to have that tough conversation with my parents. And talking to other friends and whatnot, like this election has really hurt a lot of their family conversations, and like, plus pandemic, right? It was kind of like, I don't want to talk to my mom. I don't want any type of help because they're all Republicans and I just can't deal with that. And I was just like, oh, I'm really lucky that I don't have to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I've had other conversations with my parents that have hurt my feelings about like Black Lives Matter and how my dad was totally like whatever with it. But you know what? I lived it and learned, and then we moved forward. And I actually, between June and October, my dad asked really pointed questions about voter suppression. Like, he would watch the campaigns and he's like, "Elaine, what do they mean? What about voter suppression? Why are they saying that people don't have the ability to vote?" And so I had to explain to him, "Dad, like in certain areas, there's gerrymandering, or they'll do something where they'll eliminate voting centers in highly populous areas of BIPOC communities, which makes it difficult to vote, where you're in line for 10 hours just to vote, Dad." And he's like, "Oh, that's voter suppression. That's not fair."
We left Philippines for this.
And my dad's like, "Oh, I see what they're talking about." And I'm just literally like, "Oh my God, are all the TikToks I'm watching about the electoral process actually working?" Because I'm able to recite this stuff to my parents. And it worked. My parents understood, or my dad did at least. And I was just like, I'm really happy we're having these conversations. And I don't feel anger at you because it's hard. And you only have one set of parents. So you need to have those talks.
There's a very good like short documentary about voter suppression on Netflix. It's really? Explain This, I think, series.
Nice.
Where they talk about like the history of voter suppression, how it's working today.
Yeah, I'll check it out. No,
I was going to say I've fully avoided any conversation about who my parents voted for.
Oh, yeah, same here. I was trying not to have the conversation, actively trying not to have the conversation, because I feel like my dad will like try to provoke an argument and my mom will try to avoid an argument. So might as well just not talk about it at all. I'd rather not talk about it at all. Yeah. So we have not even talked about the election since it has come and gone.
You know what's kind of weird? So my parents are actually like anti-Trump. My dad's a Republican, my mom's a Democrat. But they're anti-Trump. And then so Gurley's parents were over because they were taking care of the baby. And I think my dad, when they came over, my dad was talking about Trump. And I don't know if it was like a weird subject for them, because your dad, your Gurley, your parents didn't mention who they voted for. So I don't know if it was like a weird, awkward moment.
I thought you were going to say that they actually did say who they voted for, but fuck.
No,
I really don't want to have that conversation.
So 4 years, was it 4 years ago when we had, well, I guess it was 4 years
Yeah.
ago, right? When we had
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
reaction
Yeah.
to the election, we were
all fucking sad.
We were all sad. we were all like deeply,
holy
deeply
shit,
sad.
we now live in fascism. What are we going
Yeah.
to do?
Yeah. And I think even that episode, I said, I can't believe I left the Philippines for this. But I did want to say, I'm kind of like Elaine, and my parents are registered Republicans. Whether or not they knew they're registered Republicans, beside the point. Totally party lines all the way throughout until Trump. And my dad's
not my
actually pretty
parents.
vocal.
My parents are not
vocal
registered
about it.
Republican.
So for a long time, and I told Joe this on a deeply personal level, like that election fucked me up. It totally messed me up. It totally messed up my faith in the electoral process and my faith in like what like in the world, what is happening. It totally just messed me up. I became very, very cynical, and I became very, very like angry about politics, etc.
You became me.
Well, what I kind of wanted to remind people were a couple of things, right? The first thing I already said is like a lot of politics is local. Aside from that election, aside from the presidential election, there was a lot of measures out there locally. There were a lot of Congress people that were running that that represented our wants and our needs as a Filipino American community, or as an Asian American community, or people of color. The other thing I wanted to remind people was, especially for me personally, this was never about Republican and Democrat. It just wasn't. I have a lot of friends that I'm very, very good friends with that are Republican. I have friends that work for Republicans. I have friends that work for Bush. I have friends that work for McCain. And this was not the reason it angered me so much is because it wasn't really about Republican or Democrat. Clearly, my parents, who have been card carrying, quote unquote, Republicans, this was not about Republican and Democrat for them. This was it was really about a person who's and another person, like the challenger of our soon to lead president. So I'm happy, of course, that we get to live in a country that allows us to discuss freely and all that stuff. And but it does make for interesting conversations in our families, right? I imagine, or avoidance, whichever route you decide to choose. But that was my reaction to it. To be honest with you guys, I legit cried.
Same.
Cried. Yeah, it was like Saturday morning. I cried. So.
Well, that surprised me, Elaine, that you cried.
Well, I cry all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
On Saturday morning, when we found out, we were having brunch with Mike's parents, and I was just like, "I'm gonna."
Texting. You were texting our.
Yeah, I was like, usually when we have brunch with them, it means they're paying for it, right? So I was like, I'm gonna order the most expensive thing on the menu. I'm gonna celebrate. I ordered chilaquiles. I put carne asada on it. Oh, you want these extra? You want the add-on of pancakes? Like, yes. Just added everything. Just make this breakfast a $45 breakfast for myself. Yes. And it felt good. It felt good to have Mike's Republican parents pay for it, knowing that the current administration is on the way out.
I don't know. For me, I think I was just more relieved than anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't like oh, I want to go outside and I guess I kind of, but then I was just more relieved. I'm like, oh, thank God, But what's funny is there are still like huge swaths of Filipino Republicans who are demanding a recount, and they think that it's fraud. I remember there was a picture in a Trump rally in Las Vegas, and like in the front, in the clear in the front of the picture is a group of Filipinos who have a sign and a banner that says "Fil-Am Republicans of Southern Nevada," and of course I knew it was real, because they had the same freaking banner that all Filipino immigrants have the same font and have a picture.
And
you know
vicinity?
What I'm talking about, huh?
Yeah.
They say "and vicinity" on it.
But
Got the
We're
It's
wearing
the
barangay
same-
vests.
the same, like there's probably just like one graphic designer for all Filipino
We talked about
immigrants
this.
who have the same freaking taste in banners. They only know how to design what, and there's a banner downstairs in Girly's house of
Oh yeah.
Girly's niece says happy
What?
7th birthday, and it's the same kind of banner.
I know exactly what you're talking
Yes,
about.
and it has like a photo
Vinyl,
of them.
It's long.
Vinyl. Yeah, same
face-
font.
Face.
Her
Yes.
face might be even on
whatsoever.
it too.
Oh, it's multiple pictures on it.
Oh, of course, multiple pictures.
That
They're
guy's
either-
making a killing. Whoever making those
Oh my
banners.
gosh, that guy.
So
So
we
rich.
need to- so you're saying, Joe, we need to attack this business and open up our own sign
God.
making business.
I still contend we should be selling our own TFAL barangay vests with the same
Yes.
font and style.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And vicinity
so-
vests.
But if you do have, Trump loving relatives in your family, I do sympathize with you. I'm older now. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm in my late 20s. But
Your second 20s.
but second,
Times 2.
I do not have the energy to kind of engage with, toxic relatives like that.
Mm.
It's just all, it's basically like kind of battle fatigue. I did that
Yeah.
when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like with family, it's hard because, we grew up as Filipino Americans. We grew up in very communal spaces. At least a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of us lived in communal spaces where,
Mhm.
communal living, especially in Filipino American culture, is very much for survival.
Mhm.
And when you have a family member who is very toxic like that, it sucks.
Permeates.
It
Yeah.
totally permeates, and you don't want to go to like whatever family parties or don't want to
Mhm.
go home. It's difficult. I don't know. And I don't know how you feel about like supporting musicians that have a checkered past, like Michael Jackson, James Brown, or whatever, Chris Brown, R. Kelly. I can still enjoy their music without without kind of guilt or consequence. So I don't know, maybe that would be my advice, is like take what you need from that family member, but leave, just avoid them as much as possible.
So you're still gonna invite Tito R. Kelly to your parties? Is what you're saying.
My mind's telling me no.
Okay, you know what?
Oh my
My
god.
body.
I mean, I'll just say, like, I have no problem with like burning that bridge, honestly, and I guess I'm different in that way. But also, I will never tell them that the bridge has been burned. So it's kind of like, because like
The
But I'll
most
notice it's like-
Passive-aggressive
Yeah.
to the max.
I'm from the burbs, passive aggressive to the max. But I mean, like I've had like relatives and friends like closer to my age, who are clearly expressing very like pro-Trump like ideologies without even necessarily saying it. And then I have other kind of cousins and relatives asking me about those same relatives, like, wait a minute, is that person pro-Trump or whatever? Like it's fascinating, right? But I'll still follow that person on Instagram. I just won't like, talk to them in person or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
But isn't this so different though? Isn't this so different? Like, didn't this
isn't
kind of
different.
divide us more than anything?
Like, it's different because there's like a flag analogy, right? Like that I've been seeing, like this meme where it was like the Nazi flag, losers, the Confederate flag, losers, the Trump flag, losers, right? All those three, right? It's like fascism, racism. Those are the things combined.
Yeah.
So any family members that I have out there that support the area, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to have any type of conversation with you.
yeah, you're a fucking loser.
I was having this conversation with Kat and Joe actually the other weekend. And I was and also because I was having this conversation with myself in my head. Like, are all Trumpers racist?
Not
But
all
they-
Trumpers
no.
are
It's not
racist,
that
but
they're
all
all
racists
racist.
support Trump.
Yes, but it's
Okay.
and also that the racism isn't a line for you. And that's the part where I'm like, nah, bitch, I can't fucking do that. I
So-
can't fuck with you.
But
like
what
that.
if it's your what if it's your parents? You're gonna
fuck
burn your
them.
no. You're gonna
Well, but
so Mike. Wait, hold on. So Mike, you're gonna burn your bridges with your parents.
I mean, I've been thinking about this way about COVID too, right? Like I have friends who are like not necessarily like pro-mask, I guess. And I was writing this thing where I was going to say like, "Fuck you," and I hope you die for not wearing a mask, because that's how angry I was at those people for like having this very like ridiculous opinion. So that's how I feel about like Trumpers. It's just kind of like, you know what? It's not that because I believe that they're racist, but because they're to you guys' point, like they're enabling a person who is genuinely kind of aired on the side of the racists,
Right.
And so like by proxy, you are enabling kind of the worst of our
people.
You know, of our people.
Fully agree. Fully
So-
agree.
Well, it's funny.
But hold
my
on,
dad-
but
Don't at me, people.
But then what I'm saying is, but that you obviously mended that bridge with your
Not
parents.
really.
I don't know.
That-
I just don't want to
it's
talk
not
politics
really.
anymore.
It's
No,
a
so
tactical-
that's what I'm saying. So like you
That's what he
partition
said.
you
Yeah, I
partition
found,
certain parts.
Yeah.
Right. You partition certain parts of your parents or whoever your relatives.
Mhm.
And I guess that's what I meant about like, R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, right?
So
Like,
Yeah.
you
basically,
can partition certain parts of people.
compartmentalize life
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. But it's hard because they're fucking dumb. I don't know. like no joke, my parents.
Wow,
my
such
parents-
a non-partisan conversation, right?
I know.
my,
Right?
my dad actually was sharing how he talked to his brother in New Jersey to greet my aunt happy birthday, and they're talking about the election. He was just like, we're gonna vote for Biden Harris, and then my uncle was like, we're probably. I think my dad said he was gonna vote that way, but he was like, a lot of Filipinos in New Jersey, they're gonna vote for Trump. Like he was saying, like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but they work in healthcare. They are frontliners, and they were gonna still vote for Trump. And I literally was like, do you think it's the abortion part, Dad? And he was like, I do think so. I think it is the abortion part that like they think that Trump, because he's aligned with Republicans, means he's aligned with the pro-life movement, which is fucking bullshit because he's paid for probably 1 million abortions with all the.
I was gonna say like he's
prostitutes.
actually probably more responsible for more abortions than any other president.
Yeah. And then I wanted to be like, Dad, on that line of rationale and logic, those same people should be voting for Biden because he is a practicing Catholic, a practicing Irish American Catholic. I am not a practicing Catholic. Sorry, Mom and Dad, but you'll never listen to this anyway. But I think that is a notable fact. Also, that Catholicism was the one reason my parents are fucking Democrats. So, like, all these people these Filipinos who are like, oh, Trump is this blah, 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 because he's for pro-life. You can go look your hypocrisy in the mirror and go look at all the wrinkles and then possibly go, oh, I'm ugly because I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm angry.
Wow.
I'm angry. But
So
guess
how
what?
do you feel though, Lane?
I'm a little angry. Ryan, I'm just angry.
Should we have a person who voted for Trump be on the show?
What? So we're gonna yell at them?
No, it'd be a healthy discussion. Hey,
Well, I
what
mean,
the
so,
hell's
like-
wrong with you?
There was like a
Question one.
There's an article not that long ago about Filipino Trump rallies. That was by Anthony
Anthony
Ocampo, right?
Ocampo.
Anthony
Former
Ocampo.
guest.
Press guest.
Former
And
guy.
I mean, he kind of asked them kind of what their perspective were like why they support Trump.
But
Does
in that
anyone, like-
article, he didn't get an answer that I felt was adequate.
They're all short. Those answers.
I mean, I think a lot of it, why a lot of them are, pro-Trump is, anti-abortion. Anti-abortion is a huge thing. Republican and Catholicism, the Catholic dogma,
Yeah.
right? Another part of it is like
The
They're-
bootstraps mentality idea.
bootstraps mentality, and they're against against illegal immigration. So I think that's a huge thing, but I also
is
think it's
funny,
race.
like,
I think it's fucking race, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yep.
it's related to the whole bootstraps model.
Yeah.
But no one's ever gonna admit that. But
Yep.
Yeah. No one wants to admit that they're racist.
Yeah.
But like, let's be real. They're all racist.
Yeah, Tito R. Kelly is a racist, guys. So. Don't invite him to the Thanksgiving party.
Just as long
What?
as he stays on the adult table, we're fine.
There's not going to be a Thanksgiving party because it's
No
COVID
parties.
times and you're not supposed to be having parties. So at least the benefit of this election year is that you're not going to have those awkward conversations with family because you're not supposed to be meeting with them.
Yeah, you shouldn't. So fuck that.
So just to like close out this conversation, just a couple of trivia questions for you guys. Who is the first Filipino elected to office in America?
Whoa.
I have
First Filipino.
Dr.
elected-
Bernardo?
Is it Velma Valoria?
No. Oh, I remember that name. According to Wikipedia, it is
Monty Manibog?
Peter Duja to the Hawaii Territorial House of Representatives in 1955.
Oh.
The first in the continental United States. That's Larry Acera in 1973, elected to City Council of Vallejo.
Oh,
Vallejo.
Vallejo.
Oh, nice.
But as I look at kind of this list, a lot of them are in Hawaii for I
Yeah.
think obvious reasons. But you know, I think like as we look to the future of our representation in this community, and some of you who may or may not, consider the idea of running for office, which if so, we should scrub all of these podcast episodes so that you can have a successful
Ryan.
campaign.
It's too late. It's too late for Ryan. It's too late.
I sort of like prefer to walk for office. Running is.
Oh my God.
I
Wow.
don't like to run.
What about a jog? Can you jog?
I can jog.
Okay.
Bike.
I think just as a closing question for all of you is like, what is like maybe the number one issue a person running for office, either as a Filipino or to engage with Filipino voting blocks, what is maybe the number one thing they should consider as how to do that successfully, like engaging with our community?
That
Which we should talk
Filipinos
to.
are not a monolith, and so there is no number one issue.
Well, I think one thing is don't just listen to one community member because they will say, I am the representative of the Filipino American community and you have to listen to me.
I also represent the vicinity. So even over there, it's me.
Even like, second generation Filipino Americans who claim to be community leaders. Like there is no one like community leader who knows everything and
Yes.
who represents everything. So you can't just listen to one person and pretend that, oh, I have the community backing because I have this guy's or this person's
Absolutely.
endorsement.
I
Mine is
think if you're running for office, listen to TFAL, and we will tell you a lot of confusing things that.
And then we're clearly like not a fan of Trump, I guess.
What if they listen to like the half-baked episodes?
Then please don't steal them, or maybe give us credit.
Mine would be to actually work and to actually do the work of finding out community needs. And work towards understanding how the process is.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. Running for office is really, really difficult. Don't have an expectation from a community member and be mad if the communities like aren't supporting you. That's on you if you're running.
Yeah.
Don't be mad at the community if you didn't do your job and actually work for their vote. So work for your vote.
Yeah, Viragosa. How about you, Girly?
Well, it's very much in line with everything that's already been said. But I think it needs to start as the person is deliberating whether they're going to run or not. They shouldn't decide on their candidacy until after they've actually gotten to know various community leaders as well as issues that are happening in the communities that they're expecting to represent, because it would not pose to be a very well thought out campaign for them.
Yeah. And I think like also to even like flip this all on its head is like, community organizers, it's their job to kind of get the issues to the forefront, like
Mhm.
to make sure that whoever is running for office, Filipino or not, that they understand that, you know, from their perspectives and from kind of their communities, these are the most pressing issues. And I think if that doesn't rise to the point of being considered seriously or even referenced by an elected official, part of it is at least, you know, that those groups need to, you know, organize even harder. And part of it is like making sure that we're electing officials and people and passing legislation that allows that voice to kind of rise to that level of conversation in some way or another. That we're looking at like voting rights, that we're looking at, you know, gerrymandering. We're looking at kind of all these different things that affect our ability to both have a voice at that level and to like express our voice to kind of get the right people and legislation in place. So,
yeah, I think to that point,
Right.
I think what we learned in this past election is that community organizing is so important, and that electoral politics is pretty limiting. But I think what sustains, I think, our democracy, or sustains, you know, some kind of democratic form, is community organizing. And if, you know, I think that's lacking in the Filipino community, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And one thing that I'll add as well is it doesn't stop when the elections end. The work doesn't stop when the elections end. We need to continue to hold all of our electeds accountable. We ourselves need to stay educated on the issues that are being raised and the needs of our neighborhoods. And we need to, you know, keep doing the work and making sure that our electeds know that they're not doing the work alone. They need us to work with them.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think this is going to be our next to last episode of the year. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think so.
You know,
It's a good one. I like it.
Penultimate episode of 2020.
So
You know what I learned? Who is this Jerry and why he's meandering? You guys have mentioned it so many times.
It was coming. I knew it.
Is Jerry Chinese? Is he Mandarin?
Oh my gosh!
He's just meandering.
That is such a rude.
Oh my
Joseph.
god!
I was thinking like Mandarin orange soda.
I was thinking Jerry's lechon.
Jerry always meandering.
So clearly we're thinking about food. I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, whatever you want to call that day.
Yes.
We got one more episode for the year.
Please wear your mask. Please
yes.
socially distance. Please do not gather for Thanksgiving if you can. Or if you do it in a social distance fashion outside.
But
just leave the food on my porch. Thanks.
But what you can do is add us on Instagram and Facebook. Leave us a voicemail at what's the number, Ryan?
TikTok something?
No.
Onlyfans.com /
OnlyFans?
/ Ryan Carpio.
Check us on TikTok. Oh, they can't see us.
What's the number, Mike? Mike, what's the number?
You dancing.
1-800
No,
Cars for Kids?
805-394 TFAL.
KAR
805-394 TFAL.
Yes.
Yes,
805
you should call and leave a voicemail and say yes or no. Ryan should open an OnlyFans account.
What? TikTok. Great.
And it'll just be Ryan with Pamapas. Just like
Oh my god, I would subscribe to that, Ryan. Not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I would do it.
all right. Thanks, everybody.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.